Okay, Jessica Hart, well, my friend, my former colleague in the United States Senate, welcome to the Texas Titans podcast.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
Well, I guess it shows that, I don't know how we had the same job because you're a lot smarter and more accomplished than I am. And I mean, you're a Texas Titan. I'm just the guy with the microphone going out and talking to the Titans. So
No, that is
well
not
done, ma'am.
true.
So, well, I'm so excited to have you on for a couple of reasons. Just so the audience knows, this is, and we may slip into this at some point because this is like two friends catching up. I mean, since Jess moved off to DC into the alternate universe that is the Beltway, it's where this is a way to both bring the audience a really cool and accomplished guest, but also to I'm gonna go ahead and take liberty with the fact that I'm catching up with my friend. So it's so good
Yeah,
to see you, Jess. So how have you been? How is DC? How have you adjusted?
it's good. I'm loving it up here. The job is great. I would love to be back in the Texas. I miss all my friends, my family in Texas. So I would love to take this job and put it there. But DC is great. It's a fun place to be. Not quite as much right now during COVID and other stuff, but it's a good place. Yeah.
Well, here's one of the things that I'm really excited about because, like I said before we came on air, you not only do you have a cool job, but it's a job that most people probably don't even know exists. It's one of
Yeah.
those jobs in the Department of Justice that's doing incredible things on a much larger scale than most people realize about one of the biggest challenges we're facing all over the world, and which is the issue of human trafficking, domestic violence, and just some of the terrible, terrible
Hmm.
tragedies that are going on in the country and beyond. But before we get there, I want you to take us back because you're an attorney that has had a really cool career path, and that's how our paths cross. I'm not an attorney, but whenever we both entered kind of public sector life close to the same time. That's where our paths crossed in the
Hmm.
Senate. But take us back to kind of where you're from. You go to law school and you go to work for, and this is something that's unusual too. You go to work for, I mean, a marquee firm. I mean, you're kind of living that young attorney's dream, and then you find your way in the United States Senate. So just kind of take us along that path and how that road took you to where you ended up.
Yeah. And I've definitely had some different pivots throughout my life. I was actually born in Texas, born in Houston, but lived there till I was 5. And my family actually moved every couple years for my dad's job. So I actually lived in California, Montana, lived over in England for a little bit, but came back, went to high school in Texas, and then went to UT. And at UT, I actually studied finance and thought I was going to do finance. I was definitely better at the math and science side, and actually pivoted my last year of college. Thought, I don't want to sit behind a desk. I don't want to look at numbers. I like working with people. Took a business law class and thought, hey, I'm going to go to law school. Went to law school at Bayor Law School. Right out of there, the big push when you're in law school is go work at one of the big firms. Kind of get the best grades you can, do the best you can, and get one of these big law firm jobs. So I did. I was lucky enough. I worked at Bracewell. Had a great partner, great group I worked with. Was there 5 years. But like I said, my whole reason when I kind of switched from finance to go to law school was I want to work with people. I don't want to sit behind a desk. And I was finding in the law practice, especially at a big law firm, it's a lot of billing hours, behind desk, doing research, not a lot of people interaction until maybe you're a later partner doing the kind of rainmaking side. And so that's when I kind of reevaluated what I wanted to do and really took another career change and kind of went into politics, where I'd already been working with people in the community on different boards and thought, this is something I want to spend more of my time on. Worked for Senator Cruz. That's how I met you. And then kind of this DOJ job really combines a lot of those aspects. So, right away, I'm still working with law. I still love the law, but it combines the pieces that I liked from Cruz's job, working with people, still feeling like, you're making a difference, giving back, public service. So this has really been a great move for me because it combines a couple of those, different passions I had.
Well, and one of the things too that I think, it shocks people sometimes whenever I discuss the crew's job, whenever you say it's a nonpartisan job. Yes, the boss is an R. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
senator in the state of Texas, and that's so. Yes, you're working in a Republican Senate administration, but you get to work with everybody, left, right, center, and that
Oh,
to
yeah.
me, I always describe the job as regional directors, as we were, is being like a city council member for the United States Senate. You get to represent everybody. You hear little bitty problems, you hear really big ones, and everything in between. And so I think it's also good to note that the role you're in now at the Department of Justice is one of those roles as well. It is a nonpartisan. It does not matter which American is suffering at the hands of violence. You're there
Yeah.
to try to use your talents and expertise to solve those problems. Okay, one of the things though, as far as tactics go, because as you know, in the Texas Titans podcast, I'm always trying to tease out those tricks and habits that made you successful and got you to where you are. Whenever you had to make those pivots, and I know it was a really big one because your old buddy Jason told you should do exactly what you're doing right now in the city you're doing
I
it.
know, one of my biggest supporters here
Yeah,
says it. Yeah.
absolutely. I knew it was a good call.
Oh,
But tell me how you, whenever faced with a big life changing issue like that, career wise or other, how do you process that, and kind of do you have a methodology, something as rudimentary as the old Ben Franklin pros and cons list, or how did you kind of assess the entire situation? Because a lot of people listening to the podcast, and I always say this, Jess, I think our audience is somewhere between 25 and 60. So we've got young people coming right out of undergrad. We've got people that are mid-career, maybe making a pivot towards
yeah.
entrepreneurship or moving within there, trying to figure out how do I make the best decisions on the trajectory that I'm on, as well as just, some people now that in their 60s are wanting to start a whole new deal. So take us through kind
Hmm.
of your decision-making process whenever you were faced with those big moments where a big change was about to happen.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I learned is really being able to think outside the box a little bit and just use your resources around you. If I were to think about specific job at DOJ, am I going to be, the director of the Office for Victims of Crime? 3 years ago, I did not, would have never projected that, would have never thought of this job. But I think being open to hearing other people's recommendations, talking to your friends, talking to coworkers, ideas come up that maybe, at first, it wasn't something you were thinking about, to really take that back and think, maybe this is the next step to something further. And so even my first job, looking at ledge affairs back at DOJ, that probably wasn't the first job I was kind of aiming for when I thought, hey, I'm going to try to go up to DAC, up to DOJ. But really talking to more and more people, found this was the right route, and being kind of open to take that first step. And I think with a lot of these jobs, especially if you're, trying to get into DC, sometimes it's just getting your foot in the door, taking that first role, proving yourself, and that will open up kind of other doors that, again, you just maybe never knew were there even too.
Yeah. And so tell us, let's dive into exactly what it is that you're doing now at DOJ.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the Office for Victims of Crime. So that's within DOJ. And I oversee $9 billion in funding that goes directly to victims of crime. So the money either goes directly to them or through states or through nonprofits. So when we're talking about victims of crime, that can mean, literally any kind of victim of crime. So you have your typical, let's say, murder, human trafficking, domestic violence. But then we're also looking at one of the big AG priorities right now is elder fraud, elder justice, elder financial fraud, especially during the pandemic. We've seen a big uptick in that. Elders are at home by themselves. Scammers are really using that to their advantage right now. Anything from, we also do, let's say, mass terrorism. So in Texas, we had the shooting in El Paso, or the shooting in Santa Fe High School. So we actually give money directly to those communities. One interesting thing, so when you hear about federal money going out to the rest of the nation, you normally think it's taxpayer money. Our money is actually funded through fines and penalties paid by convicted federal felons. So you have felons that are convicted, they're paying their fines and penalties, and it's actually that is now kind of goes through the federal government and goes back out to help crime victims. So it's an interesting source of funding that's very different than the usual kind of taxpayer-based funding that the federal government gives out.
So with regard to, let's talk about some defense tactics here, like for the elder. Like I heard one of the worst stories I've ever heard about some scammers taking advantage of the elderly. There was this roofing company years ago that went to an elderly lady's door and said, negotiated a deal to complete her roof, to give her a new roof. And it was significantly less than the competition. So she hires them. For 3 or 4 days, there was beating and banging on the roof. There were guys that were showing up. However, they were doing absolutely no work. They were just on the roof, and she had no idea. And then you hear now this one. I don't know if you've investigated any of these cases, but where they're actually selling deeds to people's houses. And I guess it's got to be, people that are older, that their house is actually paid off. But that's one that I've heard come up that I'm like, what? And like people all of a sudden they start getting bills because people have basically taken the deed and then borrowed against the home. So there is all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So what are some things that, these seniors among us, what can they look out for? How can they better protect themselves?
Yeah. One of the big scams we've been hearing about recently is where the scammers are actually kind of enticing the elderly to then almost be a part of their scam without letting them know. So, hey, we're helping out this nonprofit. Do you want to help out? Do you want to help out XYZ Children's Fund? A lot of elderly people, they have time on their hands. They're like, yeah, why not? I can call from home. I can help out. I'm going to help this nonprofit. And when in the end, it's kind of a setup of a Ponzi scheme, and they're pulling money into normally it's offshore, so it's hard for us to actually get the money too. But that's a big scam we've been hearing a lot about, and especially during COVID when, again, seniors are sitting at home. They're trying to see, how can I help out? I don't want to go outside. I don't want to get sick. Hey, someone reached out to me. They asked me, 10 phone calls a day. I can do that easily. And actually, they're part of the scam. That's one right now to especially look out for. But I think it's just, being vigilant, asking friends, family, if you local group, church group, just kind of running it by other people to make sure, hey, does this sound right?
Right.
That's one of the big things. So we also fund a national elder fraud hotline, and that is, I think, really useful to call in and report potential fraud, and that goes, then directly can be reported to the FBI to look into as well. If you think something is, possibly, if it sounds wrong, call, and you can at least get some advice and some counseling, and if it is potentially a crime, loop in the FBI to go after them.
All right, so now I want to dive into something that is that I'm just fascinated, just because the more I hear about it, the more it blows my mind, and that is the human trafficking issue. Talk to us a little bit about kind of what's going on. Like, what does it look like? Is there one standard element of human trafficking that is kidnapping and taken overseas? I mean, most people listening to this have probably seen the movie Taken, and that's like, there you go.
Yeah.
That's human trafficking. But there's also or the at the very end of the movie, what was it? Traffic, I guess. Was it Traffic, I think, where, all of the immigrants from either, I think they're from Cambodia or somewhere, end up getting dumped off in LA, but they're brought over. And we had this in Lindell. I guess it was probably, which is, for those listeners who are outside the area, that's a small bedroom community of Tyler, about 15 minutes away. And so population maybe 5,000. And it was a massage parlor. And the girls that worked there, they had been brought over, they'd been smuggled over with the understanding that if they worked there long enough, they would eventually get their quote unquote freedom or citizenship, whatever the case
Yeah.
may be. And so that was one that I had never even knew was a thing. It got busted pretty early on. But what are some of the
Oh
stories
yeah.
that you've investigated, that you've seen, and just kind of how do you prevent it? You know, what, just whatever you want to talk about. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fascinated.
So I think, I mean, that's where everyone starts off, is kind of like the movie Taken, like you said. That's everyone's idea of, you know, you're over there on vacation, someone grabs you and, you know, throws you into this life. That is really the very small percentage of human trafficking. Really, I mean, really, it's really more, you know, vulnerable people, typically younger girls and boys, that get into this life through maybe vulnerabilities in their life. Their trafficker, a lot of times it's these kind of romance scams, or Romeo scams, as we call them. So, you know, that older boyfriend shows them love and slowly entices them into this. It's not a, you know, we grabbed someone out of their home and threw them into this life. It's a slow progression, but usually exploiting on, you know, that person's vulnerabilities. And you get, I think, you know, even in Texas, a lot of, let's say, runaways, just, you know, bad at home situations, and they see this person as showing them love, something that they maybe haven't gotten their whole life. And, you know, they don't know exactly what love looks like. And so to them, this is love. And then so when the, you know, their boyfriend who loves them asks them small favors that kind of eventually lead into bigger favors, you know, it's not cut and dry. It's not one day they ask this, the next day that. And then unfortunately too, you add an element of drugs. A lot of them, you know, use that as well. And I think it's crazy how prevalent it is, you know, especially even in Texas. I did a ride along with TABC's executive director a couple weeks ago, and it was the same thing. I mean, he drove along and pointed out that massage parlor. I mean, it was rampant in Houston. And then you got to think about, where is basically the customer base coming to? Because they're, you know, there's a reason this is a business. It makes a lot of money. Where, you know, there obviously is a customer base for that as well, unfortunately. And so there's kind of two angles at looking at this, you know, looking at it from the kind of the prevention side, and then looking at it from after the fact and going after either customers or the larger business owners that kind of are trafficking the girls too.
Wow. Wow. And so is that kind of like, as far as, like, I got to believe that social media has enhanced this, and it probably is a cottage industry all on its own. So what,
Yeah.
I guess, okay, for the parents out there, you know, I've got Rylan and Abby, they're older now, they're 19 and 20.
Yeah.
God willing, they're not going to be, you know, fall into this, but, you know, I just watched The Social Dilemma. Have you seen that?
No,
Oh my
I
gosh,
haven't seen that
Jessica.
one.
All right. So everybody out
Do
there,
I want to see it?
well, so the social dilemma is kind of, it's a bunch of the guys that were pioneers in the social media industry talking about, to kind of sum it up, is like, well, all the algorithms that are being created for one reason: to get your attention and to keep you and hold you on looking at a screen as
Oh
long as
yeah,
possible
yeah,
before they can pop an ad in front of you. And then a lot of that's driven by AI and these amazing technologies. The only problem is AI does not know how to decipher whether is this going to be good for the end user or not. And so, and one of my favorite
hmm
quotes, as far as one that just kind of stuck with me, from The Social Dilemma, was, you know, we get Gmail for free, we get Facebook for free, Instagram, Twitter. And one of the guys on there, he said that it's kind of a saying out in Silicon Valley: if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And so, all right, so all this
yeah,
stuff we're
yeah.
doing, they're gathering data. And so
Oh yeah,
anyway, but it showed how vulnerable, and in particular young girls who seem
yeah.
to struggle more with image issues, and how, you know, with the Instagram filters, and it kind of zeroes in on that. So how has social media really changed the landscape of what you guys are having to battle?
Yeah, and I think especially in light of COVID too, because you have kids at home less access to their friends. That's their daily interaction. Teachers aren't around to see them. So kids that are maybe not in the best home situation are probably left even more unattended with their phone. This is their only interaction, sitting there on Instagram, and are more easily preyed on by someone. And so, an older, again, boyfriend, just starts complimenting them and then gets them into this situation. I think, again, during COVID, we've seen even more that there's really an uptick in trafficking, and the people that would typically, I think same, another whole topic is domestic violence, big uptick. People are at home, in confined spaces even more. We have more economic stress on families. And so, very high increase in domestic violence, high increase in human trafficking. These things, they don't stop because of the pandemic. If anything, they're more concentrated because there are more stressors in people's lives. So I think even before COVID, just with kids on their own devices, I think I'm not a parent, but just, parents beware and, try to at least monitor who is your kid continually talking to, who are their friends on Facebook, on Instagram, just the most you can know, because I think that is a very easy way. An example I like to hear or have heard is if you're on a playground, would you let your 5-year-old kid, talk to this guy standing over here that's 30 by themselves? A 30-year-old man walks up to your 5-year-old kid, that would be odd. You would be a little bit alarmed. But online, they can message, your 10-year-old daughter can be sitting there being messaged by the same person, and you don't know about it, and they're not as worried, and they're less assuming because they're sitting there. They feel like there's space between them. So they're like, oh, why not? I can talk to this person. I don't know them. But then that relationship develops. One interesting thing, too, a lot of where we get, especially child abuse, evidence and pictures and learn about child abuse is a good portion is through Facebook. And if Facebook is actually planning to go blind. So like on WhatsApp, law enforcement cannot get the messaging between people on WhatsApp. That's called, it's gone blind. So Facebook has stated that in the future, they've pushed the date back, that they will be going blind as well. So law enforcement will actually not be able to ever get that data and be able to prosecute. And that's actually where we get a lot of tips for child abuse.
And why is that, Jess? Are they just claiming a privacy issue?
Yes, that is the claim. DOJ has been pushing back against that, and they have now delayed their timing. But it is a big concern, honestly, for law enforcement.
Oh, wow. And I wonder, and of course, I'm thinking out loud, and I don't expect you to respond, but, we're hearing more and more cases of where in certain corners of, a thought of the world, whatever, there's this more acceptance, if you will, of pedophilia, and they're trying to kind of redefine what it is as a kind of as opposed to a nefarious act. Instead it's a choice or whatever. And again, without going too deep into that, that's scary to think that there's probably some, I would think, I'm trying to say, why in the world would it be logical for, let's say mom and dad say, hey, notice that 10-year-old daughter had this creepy old dude, that's on her, we did some research, now you can't explore that and figure out it's not an uncle, it's not anybody that we know. No, we're going to make it harder for you to figure out who that guy was and what the relationship
and
was.
Protect your child. Yeah, it's scary. It is the balance between privacy, but I think there's some very big law enforcement security concerns. And honestly, as a parent, I just it is very concerning. Very concerning.
And kind of just going along this whole, like going back to the Social Dilemma documentary, I was talking to a group yesterday and I said, so I think to myself, and okay, well, here's one of the other illustrations that one of the guys gave. He said, imagine you have you, the individual, and in between you and like 100 brilliant engineers and computer scientists that are trained to figure out how to use data to manipulate your behavior. The only thing between you and them is this little device. And so that kind of brain power coming at the individual is very overwhelming. And I was telling this group yesterday, I'm like, like for me, I'm a nerd. I'm constantly reading and trying to fix my brain and make sure that, I'm studying, Stoic philosophy and meditation and doing all these things to keep my brain at an optimal performing level. Most people are not as geeky as I am. They're just living their freaking lives and don't have time for that. And so, especially a 15-year-old kid. And so when you think about the heavy weight of intellect that this battle, I hate to say battle, but it kind of is for the individual's attention, it's pretty overwhelming when you think about it. And so now to hear that is kind of crazy. That's one of the things they mentioned in that as well, kind of along these lines. It sounds like the folks at Facebook aren't really interested in this. He said, when they were creating these algorithms and they were creating social media, they never had any child psychologists or individual behaviorists or whatever, thinking about, hey, what are the ramifications of this? What could happen? They're like, no, it was one mission, like any other business model, and at the time they thought, well, we just want to be able to grab people's attention. That's what we're going to do. That's the business model. And now you have all these negative ramifications coming from. It's really crazy. All right. So tell me a little bit about the economics of the human trafficking. Is there an area where it's particularly bad? Because, one of the things, just my limited knowledge of kind of global economics and how the reason why drug lords or warlords become warlords is because there is no Silicon Valley in Chad. There is no, in Chagukistan or whatever stand. There's probably limited means for industry and technology and, ways to make a living. So a lot of times they have to resort to these ways of creating this, black market, this, criminal syndicates to make money. So are there particular areas either domestically, like within the United States, or abroad that you can point to and go, yeah, it's a major part of the overall economic profile of that area that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, Texas is definitely a hub. I think anything along our southern border is a pretty easy hub. They come across the border. Again, it's just a more of an access point there. Really, then you're looking at back to, I mean, unfortunately, like you've said, it's a business model. I mean, so you look at where's the demand. The demand is in larger cities. So you're just going to have larger swellings around large cities. One that I went to recently, Atlanta. So that's a hub because of international travel. It's a hub for international travel. So you have people kind of coming in and out, going all over the U.S., but going internationally. So it actually ends up being a hub for human trafficking there. And we have some of the airlines.
Jess, it's interesting you say that because I used to fly in and out of Hartsfield every week. And that was the first time I ever saw the big posters for, human trafficking. I had no idea that there was a correlation there. I didn't know that was, I never thought, it's the busiest airport in the country, so it makes sense.
Some airlines have been really great about trying to bring awareness, training their flight attendants for how to ID human trafficking victims, and then how to then report it. One of a law enforcement official that I know recently was on a flight back actually from Atlanta, and he spotted people on the plane. He was, off duty, just flying back, spotted, I think it was 2 victims coming back with a woman. She was bringing them back. He alerted the flight attendants. He helped them call down. So when they landed, law enforcement was able to interact and intercept there. But I think it's that really training too of identifying victims. Like you kind of said at the beginning, most people think human trafficking victims, seen the movie Taken, that's what it's going to look like. It doesn't always look like that. This example was 2 kind of teenage girls with a woman that claimed to be their mother, so it was quite close in age. All 3 of them did not have any similarities in what they looked like. I mean, it still could have been her daughters, but I think the way they were dressed, the way they were acting, the way they were using their cell phones, he said, the actual places they sat on the planes and how they kind of deferred back to the woman, how they interacted with each other on the plane and in the waiting area. I mean, he said there were just, kind of these clear signs that he saw, just as being a law enforcement official for years, working in this area, right away he saw it. But being able to train flight attendants or hotel is obviously a big industry that is involved in this, being able to train hotel employees for what it looks like. That is really key to kind of making that interception.
Wow.
And that's, I mean, a lot of what we do is funding for law enforcement, do training for identification, training for prevention. We actually have a prevention school curriculum now that's been pushed out this year that's looking at kind of younger kids, how to get on that front end, things that even young kids in school can be looking for. Another one of their, I guess, other friends at school can be manipulated and kind of are pushing them into the life, but they don't see it like that. They see it as a friend or maybe a boyfriend or that guy that's a couple years older than you. So just trying to show kids, here's what to look for, and it might not look like what you're seeing on TV.
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy too, because it's kind of that old self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want to convince yourself that something's good, then we have amazing ways to justify behavior. And not a human trafficking deal, but it is a scam artist deal. Dirty John, did you ever see that? Or what in the world? Why are you staying with this guy? He's awful. But bless the lady's heart, she wanted to believe so badly for her own sake that he was good, and I gotta believe that.
And again, it's kind of those like steps. It's not like straight from one to 9. It's these slow progressions over time, and slow justifications, and
That's crazy. So Jessica, I got to ask you, and you don't have to answer if you can't. So if you'd been around back during the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, would you have had to? Would it have come across your desk a file on Jeffrey Epstein that your group might have to figure out what's going on?
No, that would go through, and I think it did go through, a U.S. attorney's office.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would not.
That's some crazy. Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'm still gonna tell everybody that, my friend Jessica that I know, if you're the next Jeffrey Epstein that's out there, better watch out. She could bring them down. She's got her eye on the ball. So, all right. All right. So, well, tell me this, is there a difference between like the thing that just makes my stomach turn, I think anybody that's listening to this, is the sex trade. I mean, taking these young girls, they do introduce them into drugs for submission, right? And they sell them off, but I also know that there's a trafficking element that is purely just because people want citizenship. They want to be able to get to the United States, and so they traffic them there.
Yeah.
Which is the bigger of the two? Is it the sex trade? Or is it trying to gain? And I say U.S. because it's what I'm most familiar with. I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of people trying to smuggle humans into Ireland. I don't know, but I just assume that most of it is trying to get them into America. I don't see many people that being a big issue, in Guam. So, I mean, what's the major element of human trafficking? Oh, and real quick. So the old guy that's trying to like slowly lure the young person in, is it for his benefit to potentially have kind of an Elizabeth Smart deal where he kidnaps and keeps that girl captive, or does he start out in mind, it's a long play, I'm going to try to get this 12-year-old girl so I can then go sell her into the sex trade? Kind of what is there a difference there?
So really, I mean, typically it's not like they're being held captive. It's back to this kind of boyfriend-looking relationship where they start luring them in. I'm the boyfriend, and then, hey, you love me. Here's my friend. I owe him a favor. Can you do this for him? Just starting out small, and then it goes, hey, we need cash. got to pay rent, got to get food. I provide you all the food. I do everything for you. I love you. Can you just do this? We need to pay that. And it just slowly progresses where, again, if you just jump to that point 10 years before, would she have jumped to maybe saying yes, to 10 guys a day? No, but it's just this slow progression. And I think for the trafficker, it's economic. I mean, you'll hear stories that they have, 10 girls and they're playing the same ruse with each of them. And sometimes playing them off each other. Who's the favorite? And so it's really kind of back to the scammer, the manipulation, the finding that person's vulnerability and exploiting that vulnerability. Unfortunately, then people can hold other things over. So like you said, possible immigration status. A lot of times, they get pregnant and have a kid with their trafficker. Well, the trafficker might not have a criminal record, but the victim might have some prostitution charges. So then when they look at, hey, this is my kid too, you can, if you're not going to do this, I can go to court for a custody battle. And again, the trafficker might not have any criminal, might not have a criminal record, but the victim might because of this situation. So, and again, we've talked about too, drugs. They might be holding drugs over them as well. There's a lot of different ways people have gotten into it, and that the traffickers hold the victims in this type of situation as well. Another thing that we've been looking at putting money at is really got to look at the next step. How to get the victim out of the situation, get them into stable housing, and really get them into employment too. We had programs. This year was our first program for housing. So we did $35 million to 73 organizations, I think, for housing. So really looking at that next step. If you want to progress with your life, not just getting services to get out, getting counseling, but then getting housing. Then we're looking at this coming year doing some programs in employment. Really helping that person get a job is really what's going to integrate them back into society. Also, while empowering them, making them feel good about themselves again, but then also being able to pay the rent. Hopefully, if they have kids, get their kids back, be able to help support their children. So I think a lot of programs back a couple of years ago were just targeted that initial, let's get the person out, let's get them some direct services. We're now looking at what's the next step. Let's help them into the next part of life, help them become back into society again.
I love that. That's one of the things, the Hand Up Network that I'm on the board of in Tyler, same deal. There's so many amazing organizations throughout the U.S. that are great at emergency relief. You're hungry, here's a meal. You're cold, here's a coat. But then, warmth and a meal is only temporary. It's how do you transition and transform the individual's life? That is so cool to hear that you guys are focused on that. And again, this whole conversation, the things that you're working on, I think a lot of people don't even realize that the big, Leviathan that is the United States government, there's some good things happening. And this is a bright spot, in my opinion, of the of an area that most people don't know is happening within our government. So I'm glad that you're a part of it. Now, let me ask you this, Jess. Let's go back to some tactics. To the listener out there, what do you do to stay sharp in your job? What are some daily practices that you execute as far, I don't know if it's reading, if it's yoga, but some things, because one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, especially when you're in DC, clocks and time and all that really don't seem to matter. I mean, the hours and the travel and everything. Now, granted, this is a generalized statement, but I'm telling you, and I'm coming from I'm a small government guy, no surprise there by anybody listening, but people don't realize just how hard and how long the hours are for certain areas of the government. So I know you've got to be burning the candle at both ends a lot of times. How do you keep yourself sharp and good at your job, good at your personal life? How do you manage all that? What are some tactics that you deploy?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, a full-time job. I would say, I think, I've had great bosses here at DOJ, both, obviously the Attorney General, but my direct boss in my prior job here, my current job, just really great people, very supportive people. I think one thing is being able to compartmentalize a little bit too, especially in this current job, dealing with victims of crime. It's a lot at once. You've really got to be able to compartmentalize, I think, some of your job. So I feel like just little steps too. When I'm at dinner, I'm having dinner. Yes, if my phone's ringing and it's someone important, I'm going to look at it, but I try not to just sit there looking at my phone all at dinner. So I think trying to do pieces of that. Yes, I have to look at my phone every night. I'm not saying I've ever put my phone away, but trying to, I think, be intentional about what I'm doing. So when I'm at work, I'm intentional about this, focused at work. When I'm at dinner with a friend, I'm intentional about that as well. So I think that's one thing, is trying to really focus on what you're doing in that time.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to read, but it's less time. It seems like less and less time gets allocated to that recently.
If you had to gift a book to someone, what would be the book that you would give away, that you go, okay, I know you're going to either learn from this or you're just going to enjoy it? What would you give away?
Yeah. So I am a fiction reader, which I know you're more nonfiction. I read nonfiction. I make myself read it because I know you learn a lot, but I do like fiction.
I want to start reading more fiction, Jess. I think it's great. I mean, I want to do it. I'm going to try, but you're right. I'm pretty stuck on my nonfiction.
See, I'm the opposite. I have to make myself read nonfiction, and I'm always glad when I do, but I enjoy fiction. My favorite book, I guess the last couple of years, is The Goldfinch. I thought that was beautifully written. That would be my favorite. It's a long one, and it came out with a movie, but read the book. The book is much better, but I thought it was just a beautifully written book. And I'm also awful at reading any kind of crime stuff. So like Grisham's, all of that type of stuff. I read it right when they come out.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so The Goldfinch, I've actually heard of. I've had that recommended to me more than once. So I guess maybe that'll be my entree into more fiction. There was a time when I would try to keep one fiction, one business, and one biography, going all at once.
I would do that too.
Yeah, but I've gotten off the fiction, and so I need to get to that. Of course, now I've started this whole Vitruvian project thing where I'm trying to try to read one book a week, and so I'll pop a fiction in there. I'll try to make that happen. So, and it might be The Goldfinch. So I like that recommendation. All right. So as we kind of wrap this thing up, because I know you got to get back, and I appreciate your time. Again, jobs like in the Senate, those are jobs you don't just go apply for. Same with yours. I mean, those are jobs you have to kind of find your way to. So I know you got this question a lot. You probably still get it all the time, actually, and I get this a lot. I want to go work in the government. I want to go do public service, and not necessarily for ideological reasons. It's just what people want to do. So to that young person out there finishing school that wants to give back, that wants to be in public service, that wants to do more good, what advice would you give them coming out of either law school or undergrad? Give them kind of a way to start that path.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way, and you know this as well, the way into a lot of these jobs is knowing the right person at the right time and having proved yourself to that person at some point before then. And so, especially as a young person coming out of undergrad, out of law school, just go get involved. Go get on smaller young professionals boards, make friends, prove yourself on those places. Those people will scatter into the community, stay in touch with people. And when opportunities come up, they'll think of you, or you'll reach out to them. Hey, I'm looking for something new. And you've already proved yourself to them. And they will then, it'll help you kind of move to the next step. So I think really the jobs I've gotten, yes, you need skill, you need your background, you need your educational background, but a lot of it's because a friend told me, hey, there's this opening over here. I think you'd be good at it. Let me make the introduction for you, and then you've got to take it from there. But a lot of it is through that just connection that you made at some point prior in life. And again, you proved yourself earlier on that you're a hard worker and that you're genuine. And, I think your character will come out and people will help you along.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think too, I've said this before in politics, and for all intents and purposes, whenever you're starting out, a path you're going to find is somewhere along the way. Probably is going to be a political route. I don't care what side you're on. And it's funny in politics. It's kind of like volunteering in church. You say yes one time, and people will ask you to do stuff for the rest of your life. So, and that's just kind of how it goes. So I agree. And what you just hit on is something that has come up in this podcast over and over and over. When I talk to the most accomplished people, they always say it's networking, it's relationships. I mean, there's nothing, I don't care how hard some people are going to try to manipulate human nature and carve out behavior. We're always going to hire and want to work with people we like and we trust and that we just have a familiarity with. And so the more people you can, put into that network and truly establish relationships with, the higher the degree of success, I believe. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Jess, this has been awesome. It is so freaking awesome to get to see you, to talk to you again. I'm so happy for you and happy for the work you're doing. Thank you for your service. I appreciate what you're doing there. And congratulations on the upcoming nuptials. I'm really stoked about that. So excited.
I'm excited.
And hey, congratulations. Get on the LinkedIn, update it because you are now a Texas Titan, and I expect that your profile will reflect that. You're a member of the Texas Lyceum, you're a Texas Titan. I mean, you're just crushing it. Well done.
Thanks, Jason. Well, thanks for having me. This is great. I think what you're doing is great. I think it's, we need to promote more leaders in Texas and just having these conversations. I think it's always helpful to hear what someone else is saying. I mean, like you said, what someone else is reading, hear about a new book, just continue to have these kind of conversations helps everyone. So
well, the great thing is, Jess, like I always say on this show, I'm selfish. This is a pure exercise in selfishness. I get to talk to great people, learn from them, and under the guise of a podcast. So, I'm just so thankful all the guests keep saying yes because I'm benefiting most, and I know the audience is going to benefit from this conversation. So thanks, Jess. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right. Sit tight.